Massive trains like this crisscross the United States every day, but are they all the same? Coming up, we'll look at all the different types of trains that get goods to their final destinations and keep the railroad moving. From pig trains to locals, mixed freight, special moves, plus a few oddities. And of course, we can't forget about the machines that move people from A to B. Your ultimate guide to all the different types of trains in North America is next on this V12 Productions Special. Here in North America, the corporations that operate what are known as Class 1 railroads run anything from short trains pulling 1 or 2 cars to massive freight trains that can stretch more than 2 miles. Freight railroads haul just about anything you can think of. I'll show you some of the more remarkable loads a little later, but first, let's understand the basics. Over the decades, railroad companies have developed the most efficient ways to transport all kinds of goods and also people. Well, efficient on paper at least. Anyway, in this special, we're looking at all the types of trains that help these railroads get the job done. First up, mixed freight or manifest trains. These trains carry all kinds of cargo and pull all types of freight cars. You'll see these hauling boxcars, tank cars, cars hauling steel coils, covered hoppers, cars hauling lumber, and more. A high and wide load is also not out of the question. This piece of track equipment was on a very long journey to work on the Indian railways. Some of these manifest trains go straight from point A to point B, while others make stops along the way to set off and pick up cars at yards or industries. Manifest trains typically travel long distances over the railroad's main line.
188 clear north, main 1 bridge, 188 out.
And by the way, just about all the trains we're going to look at operate with a train symbol, typically numbers or a combination of letters and numbers. This symbol identifies the train to crews, dispatchers, the folks at headquarters, and of course the railroad's computer system. It may also identify a train's priority level, what it's carrying, and its origin, destination, and the date it began its journey. Some of these mixed freight trains can be extremely long, basically 2 trains in one. These require distributed power units or DPUs at the middle or on the rear. I find mixed freights to be some of the most interesting trains on the rails because they show off all the goods the railroads are capable of transporting. Okay, now on to the next train type on our list. These trains travel relatively short distances and often interact directly with the railroad's customers. Trains known as locals vary in length. As the name implies, these travel shorter distances. They could be operating on the main line or on a branch line. The type of cargo they haul may depend on the customer they're serving. Locals often deliver and pick up cars from various industries along the line. This may be the beginning of a loaded car's journey as it's transported to a rail yard to be shipped across the country, or the end of a car's journey as it's taken from a yard to its final destination at a local industry. For example, this local is switching out cars at a Coca-Cola bottling plant near the Atlanta airport. Coke relies on the railroad for shipments of corn syrup. Now, locals can be pretty interesting for us rail fans. Some are pulled by older, lower horsepower locomotives. These are ideal for all the fast starts and stops that come along with switching, and their smaller size and lower weight also make them well suited for the tight curves and sometimes poor track present inside industrial facilities. Although it's fairly uncommon, some locals also travel with a caboose at the back, but it's probably not used the way you might think. This caboose in Athens, Georgia is used as a shoving platform. It's there for long reverse movements. It actually has its own horn and provides the conductor with a place to safely watch the shove. You might already know that cabooses were replaced decades ago with end-of-train devices, or EOTs. Some of these short-distance trains may be turns, meaning they go from point A to point B and then back to point A. But this so-called turn may require running an engine long hood forward at some point. This train starts its stay in Chamblee, Georgia, then travels around 15 miles south to Inman Yard in Atlanta. There it drops off and picks up cars, then heads back to Chamblee. Of course, this train hauls all sorts of cars. Now, some trains may also shuttle cars hauling shipping containers back and forth between intermodal terminals. This one goes from Whitaker Yard in Austell, Georgia to Inman Yard and back. Meanwhile, trains traveling the shortest distances are the ones assigned to switching duties in yards, yard jobs. The main tasks here are pretty straightforward: break down and assemble trains. These yard jobs also use older locomotives. Many of these machines have been rebuilt at least once in their lifetimes. Some even use machines that rarely stray outside the yard. This is known as a slug. It has no diesel engine, and the mother unit it's connected to provides it with the electricity to power its electric traction motors. Slugs give a lash-up more powered axles to haul long cuts of cars at slow speeds. Of course, just about every type of train can be seen working in a large rail yard. Yards in big cities may also see trains operated by different railroads. This is a transfer job that goes from Norfolk Southern's Inman Yard to interchange with CSX at the company's nearby Howells Yard. The two railroads may be competitors, but they still have to work together from time to time. All right, we're now moving on to the trains that haul only one thing. They're truly impressive sights to see. I'm talking about dozens and dozens of the same type of rail car in one train. First up, commodity trains, which carry only one product but may be built from different sources and later broken down and sent to various destinations. Here's a grain train going through Mableton, Georgia. Automobiles are also shipped like this in large auto racks. Of course, without seeing the train's paperwork, I can't tell you exactly which customers these cars were intended for. Okay, so unit trains are a little bit different than commodity trains. The book The Railroad, What It Is, What It Does describes these as conveyor belts on rails. They go from one origin to one destination, and the rolling stock and other equipment involved has been specially designed for efficient loading and unloading. This coal train is loaded out west in the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. It then travels around 1,500 miles here to Georgia Power's massive plant shear in Juliet, Georgia. These trains are heavy and are typically assigned some of the most powerful units on the rails. Usually multiple units up front and a few more either in the middle or on the rear of the train. These typically feature alternating current or AC traction motors for maximized adhesion. Also of note, the cars hauling the coal on this train are owned by the power company and not the railroad. After being unloaded, the empty trains begin their cross-country journey back to the mines. Of course, unit grain trains are also pretty common. Here you see an entire consist of Norfolk Southern covered hoppers. Now, grain can include soybeans, corn, wheat, barley, flour, oats, and more. You'll also see these huge unit tank trains riding the rails. This one was hauling ethanol. The next type of train we'll look at is a relatively recent development in the long history of railroads. I'm talking about intermodal trains. These feature containers from many different shippers. Intermodal trains can trace their roots to the piggyback or pig trains that became popular in the mid-20th century. Today, you'll see a mixture of trailers on flat cars and intermodal shipping containers on the rails. Of course, intermodal means the cargo travels by two or more modes of transportation. Many of these containers begin their journeys overseas where they're placed on a ship. The ship then sails to a port where huge cranes are used to unload them. These international containers are usually of the 20 and 40-foot variety. Domestic intermodal shipments add 53-foot containers into the mix. However, these could have transloaded international goods added to them after the goods enter the country. The containers are then either put on a truck or a train bound for distribution centers or inland destinations. Sometimes small terminal railroads are used to switch cars at these ports. This footage is from the Port of Savannah in Georgia. Trains are ideal for long-haul intermodal shipments, and their rolling stock has been designed to save weight and ultimately fuel. Many of these cars are articulated and can accommodate double stacks of containers. And these spine cars only have small platforms for the wheels of a trailer, shedding a lot of the weight of a normal flat car. Intermodal trains often cross state lines and travel over different railroads. And many of these trains feature run-through power leading them. Basically, locomotives that started the journey on one railroad and weren't taken off when they rolled onto the next. These Union Pacific locomotives are far from home as they approach Norfolk Southern's Inman Yard. In a few minutes, this train will arrive at an intermodal ramp where containers are placed onto trucks which take them to distribution centers or to their final destinations. These intermodal trains are typically high priority on the railroad. They haul all sorts of consumer goods and are a huge source of revenue for North American rail companies. Okay, so if you've got an oversized or just plain unusual piece of cargo, the railroad can probably handle it. These loads are known as high and wides. The book The Railroad, What It Is, What It Does defines high and wide as, quote, a term referring to outside dimensions of a car or open top load that exceed the normal clearances on the route to be traveled. Sometimes these loads travel as part of a typical freight train. This Caterpillar construction equipment is likely headed to a port where it'll be unloaded and put onto a ship. But some loads are just too big to be added to a normal freight train. This Siemens Energy shipment rides on a special depressed center flat car. Some cars like these are capable of lifting and shifting themselves to avoid obstacles. And a caboose at the end allows the load to be monitored throughout its journey. If you thought that load was wild, well, check this out, a giant watermelon on rails. This sculpture weighs in at 16,000 pounds and is 40 feet long and 16 feet tall. It was headed to its new home at Riverside Park in Muscatine, Iowa when the city took this video. I doubt a move like that will ever happen again, but these trains are relatively common.
That's 455-29 south, clear signal south end of Tucker.
They aren't high and wides, but they are considered special moves. They carry military vehicles and supplies. This equipment may be headed to a training exercise, while other machines could eventually end up overseas. And how's this for a special move? An entire train made up of giant pipes. And I saved the best for last. 10 booster motor segments for NASA's Artemis II mission into space. I would say the railroad is the only form of transport that can move this amount of plus-sized cargo over land. Now, we'll look at the trains that transport the equipment and materials that keep the railroad moving.
W3420, North Tucker, clear signal. Siding, engines 5398 northbound.
You know, the beauty of the railroad is that it can move its maintenance equipment wherever it's needed. Each little machine here does its part to maintain the rails, ballast, ties, and track alignment. Once this train arrives at the area where the work will be done, the equipment simply rolls off these specialized flat cars and onto the rails. Other work trains may carry continuous welded rail, which can bend as the train goes around curves. Rail like this eliminates that clickety-clack sound you might be familiar with, since there aren't very many joints. Meanwhile, other work trains are loaded with ballast. Railroad companies and contractors also run high-tech trains that inspect and gather data about the rails and right-of-way. Although the technology on board has advanced, Sperry cars like this one have been inspecting rail lines for decades. Now, some of this maintenance equipment gets much bigger and louder. This Loram rail grinder restores the profile of the railhead, extending the life of the rails. Of course, while it's at work, this isn't really treated as a train per se. This is more of a piece of maintenance of way equipment. It typically has work limits that have been temporarily shut down to other trains. Ultimately, we're only really scratching the surface here. There are dozens of other types of work trains out there. We'll round out this special with the trains that carry people. Aside from services offered on the electrified Northeast Corridor, which extends from Washington, D.C. to Boston, long-distance Amtrak passenger trains largely travel over tracks owned by America's private freight railroads, while some commuter, transit, and light rail operations have dedicated lines. Those long-distance Amtrak trains make up America's inner-city passenger rail network. Some of these trains even feature names, often carried over from the fallen flag railroads that once ran them. Amtrak took over the operation of many of America's passenger trains when it was founded as a quasi-public corporation in 1971. Here's Amtrak's Crescent, which goes from New York to New Orleans.
19 got to approach the Virgin Brookwood, track 10.
This train travels on Norfolk Southern rails, and the company designates it as Amtrak 19, the southbound Crescent. However, the Crescent name is more for marketing the train to Amtrak customers and not railroad operations. Like many intercity trains, the Crescent makes several stops along its route. And also like most of Amtrak's passenger services, it's diesel powered. However, that's not the case in much of the northeastern United States, which is electrified. The Northeast Corridor features trains hauled by electric locomotives and the high-speed Acela Express. Cities large and small may also be served by intercity and regional rail supported by the state. Amtrak California provides this service to several cities. Here's the very busy Jack London Square in Oakland. And yeah, the trains run right down the middle of the street. Amtrak California trains feature a locomotive at one end and a cab car at the other. This means they can operate in push-pull mode, and the engineer simply has to change ends once the train reaches a terminus. The North Carolina Department of Transportation also offers similar regional services with its rail division. These trains can also operate in push-pull mode, but instead of a cab car, old locomotives have had their diesel engines removed and are designated as cab control units. Big, spread-out cities may also have commuter rail, taking passengers from downtown to the suburbs. Chicago's Metro is an operation you're probably familiar with. But some smaller cities also have commuter rail. This is the WeGo Star, formerly known as the Music City Star. It runs in Nashville, Tennessee using classic second-hand bi-level coaches that operate with locomotives and cab cars in push-pull configuration. The WeGo Star shares the rails with a short-line freight railroad. Now, here's a type of passenger train that you'll probably never get to ride on. Railroads call these office car specials. They allow rail company executives to survey the line, and the trains are also good for entertaining guests and current and potential railroad customers. Most of these consists are equipped with living quarters, dining cars, and a theater car with a huge window in the back. We'll end this list of passenger trains with all the scenic, historic, and tourist railroads out there whose employees and volunteers work tirelessly to keep history alive by running and preserving old equipment. While long-distance freight and passenger trains help to keep our country moving, transit systems do their part to connect communities and cities big and small. Rapid transit systems run on dedicated lines. They may be built underground, above ground, or on elevated structures. These dedicated lines give transit systems full control of scheduling, and pedestrians and road vehicles can't access the right-of-way or the dangerous electrified third rail. Some of the transit systems built after the mid-20th century feature varying degrees of automation. The Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority uses automatic train control where operators open and close doors, make announcements, and run trains manually if there's an emergency or malfunction. MARTA is what's known as heavy rail transit. It's more expensive to build, can carry more passengers, and is faster than light rail. Light rail vehicles, like these operated by the Utah Transit Authority, are typically electrified by overhead wires. But unlike heavy rail transit, they're smaller, carry fewer people, and operate on right-of-ways that aren't always grade separated. That means they may run side by side with road vehicles and are fully accessible to pedestrians. Some hybrid systems also exist, like New Jersey Transit's River Line. It uses DMUs, or diesel multiple units. This line features a right-of-way which is also used by freight trains and areas where trains operate on the streets. And of course, we can't forget about streetcars or trams that operate on or alongside public roads. So that was a pretty broad overview of the types of trains on the rails today, but I wouldn't be surprised if I missed something. One thing I didn't do here is mention some of the types of trains that aren't running anymore. A few examples include milk trains, the troop trains that ran during World War II, and mixed trains that hauled both freight and passengers. Let me know in the comments if there's a train I missed that might be worth doing a future video on. Also, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. This channel recently hit 100,000 subscribers, and I'm very thankful to all of you for making that happen. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.